Zoran Mamdani. Is that right, Colin? Am I pronouncing that right?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Or as Fox News called him, Zoran the Destroyer.
I'm Arizona Family political editor Dennis Welch.
Dennis, fake news Welch. Try to tell the truth.
And this is the Politics Unplugged podcast.
Dennis, if you have a problem with substance abuse, I am more than willing to talk to you anytime you need.
Welcome back to Politics Unplugged, the podcast edition this week. I am extremely excited to be joined by two, not one, but two Democratic consultants, Matt Grodsky and Joe Wolf. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Is this even allowed to have two Dems on at the same time?
Two Dems. It's like, yeah, the reason why we're bringing two Dems on today is because of the surprising result in the New York City mayoral race. And it has prompted a lot of reporting, a lot of opinions. We're talking about Zoran Mamdani, a relative unknown, a former state legislature, state lawmaker in New York, has appeared to have pulled off this surprising victory. We won't know the actual results of it until, I believe, July 1st, because they do ranked choice voting out there in the Empire State. But it has prompted a lot of Democrats. Your guys' party is out in the wilderness, at least on the federal level. You don't control any branch of government. And people are saying, like, look, this guy may be the answer to what they've been looking for, which is, what kind of message should Democrats be taking as they look to regain, the House, the Senate, the White House in the coming years. And Zoran's a self-described Democratic Socialist who ran on a very, very progressive ticket, talking about like free public transportation, rent freeze, these kinds of issues. And so I just wanted to kind of bring you two on and kind of get into it. And what do you guys think? And is this the guy that kind of the future of the party? Either one of you can start.
Let's just start there. No.
Let's unpack that a little bit.
Sure, Dennis. Okay. New York City is unlike any other city in America. The electorate is different. It's extremely progressive. What is happening? I mean, I think actually Rahm Emanuel wrote a op-ed in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, day before last, basically saying the voters of New York City are not the key to American progress for the Democratic Party or the country as a whole, right? Those voters just very much live in other states and certainly other parts of even in New York, right? So I think I would start there, that this is an incredibly unique environment, a laboratory, if you will, where a result like this could happen. And I honestly, right now, my opinion is this is more a function of Andrew Cuomo being an absolutely appalling candidate and there not being too many other, and for him just sucking up so much oxygen and money and preventing other candidates from ever reaching a viable stage. There are a lot of things that Zohan the Destroyer, according to Fox News, did on his campaign that I think was really effective, particularly his use of social media, his branding, all were excellent. He did a lot of things right. But in terms of like politics, I don't think this says anything about the Democratic Party. This says everything about Andrew Cuomo.
And I think, Matt, we were speaking a little bit before that in the green room. You kind of agree with Joe on that.
Don't kind of agree. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I think New York is its own special place. It's bluer than blue. It's bluer than Leo DiCaprio was at the end of Titanic. I mean, that's how icy blue it is. And I do agree that Cuomo was the factor here, right? I mean, an incredibly tainted politician endorsed by, Clinton, who obviously has his own past issues that people have to, constantly remember every time he endorses somebody. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we still are not sure totally how this shakes out in the general election. You've still got the element of, Adams is still in there and Cuomo might run as an independent. So there's a lot of ball game left on this one.
Yeah, and it's important to hit that fact too. There's still going to be a general election. This was a surprise in the Democratic primary. So yeah, you're going to get the bluest of the blue people voting for this. But what I found was interesting is this is a complete rejection of the establishment. Someone like Cuomo had the endorsements of well-known establishment figures like Bill Clinton and whatnot. And this was is this more evidence? Like Democratic voters, don't want this anymore. Democratic voters in general, at least when you start talking to like Trump voters, what they appreciate about Donald Trump is his quote authenticity. I know we get to have a whole podcast discussion about whether he's authentic or not, but they appreciate the way he talks to them. Mamdani seems like, you look at his social media game. He said he's got a great one. He's talking directly to those voters, and he got a kind of a movement going.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't want to take anything.
It wasn't that long ago that he was down in the polls.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think he ran a dynamic campaign. I remember him and the other guy whose name I'm blanking on, like they cross-endorsed each other to keep things interesting in the primary, so that was fun. He's a younger guy. But I do think he's onto something with the economic populist messaging. I mean, we know from polling, I think there was a poll in Pennsylvania a couple weeks ago that showed that it can move voters by 9, maybe even 13 points if you have an economic populist message. Don't go populist on all the social, cultural issues because that's where we get into trouble as Dems. But I think he's onto something there. And I imagine you'll see more Democrats replicate that. But I don't think it's something that we need to be wringing our hands about, in the more moderate elements of our party about what it means for the party in 2026. I think it's an outlier at the end of the day.
So just kind of ignore those results, or ignore what he ran on, how he did that moving forward?
I think that would be a mistake. I would never ignore what someone ran on, right? I mean, because look, AOC represents a tiny little district in the Bronx, right? Like, we can't ignore her, right? Like, these people do have a platform, and they're proven to be quite good at manipulating the media to get their message out there, right? They've built a brand. Now, I think my critique of them has been the same one I've had of Bernie Sanders for quite some time, is what have you done now that you've got the platform? What have you done with it? And, I think New Yorkers will find out very quickly if this guy does somehow institute a rent control or rent freeze regime, how bad that will be and how much,
Look at Joe sounding like a Republican over there.
Basic economics. No. It's business Democrat. Come on. Pro-growth. That's all. So, look, these people can't be ignored. And, look, I don't actually know how much I think Eric Adams has a shot in a general election. Even
he's got his own problems.
Yeah, and Andrew Cuomo as an independent. I mean, some of his donors are already fleeing. I think that will lose. The hot air will suck.
Yeah, but what's interesting when you start looking at election results from the New York, I mean, Mamdani did very well even among affluent New Yorkers. I mean, these are the people that would be taxed to pay for the free bus rides and rent-free and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, again, you got to get back to the Cuomo factor, right? I mean, this is a highly educated voting population that has an institutional memory of what that guy was like just a few years ago. So I think that's more the factor. And I think kind of getting to some of these other things, if he does govern, and he'll learn the realities of rent control pretty quickly. The risk for us as Dems is getting branded in his image across the board. I think that's what a lot of people are worried about. And that is a risk. But I do think that if you look back at things like 2018, in a backlash year of all backlash years, we had some instances where progressives did win general elections, and that's how you got AOC and things like that. So I don't think it necessarily means that our brand gets tainted so much that we can't get elected at a midterm. I think it's just going to be case by case in certain districts across the country.
Well, I think there's a couple things at play here, right? Like, you talk about those high net worth individuals, those incredibly highly educated, affluent people who voted for him, right? I think you and I maybe talked about this a couple weeks ago, right? Like, if you look at AOC since she's got to Congress, she's actually moderated. She kind of plays the game well now. She's not nearly the firebrand that like she was on the campaign trail that Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman ended up being. She's quite different from those folks. So I do wonder if there's an element of people who, especially some of these folks who probably are close to Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer and other, establishment Democratic politicians in the city, who are like, look, she's probably, maybe he gets there and he's fine. And, at the end of the day, he's young, he's exciting, he's a breath of fresh air, and to Matt's point, just cannot stand Andrew Cuomo, so they're willing to give it a shot, right? Maybe they're not sold, maybe they're kind of, emotionally wrapped up in it. I think there's a lot of different things that can kind of lead to these outcomes here that are not out of the ordinary or otherwise an anomaly. I mean, again, to me, like, this story is so much about the gravity of Andrew Cuomo. Is like he just pulled dread out of people because, like, we don't want to have this guy be an asshole. I mean, like, and the further we get away from COVID too, right? Like, I think during COVID, he remained quite popular because, like, later on, we saw this effect where people perceived their elected officials to be doing something. As long as you were perceived to try, whether it's throwing everything against the wall, you were trying, right? So I think he got a lot of he got a bump because he was just doing those press conferences every day. But now that we're further and further away from that, people realize he made catastrophic decisions that led to a lot of people dying, right? I mean, like, it's beyond like the sexual harassment and just the abhorrent behavior, right? Like, I mean, his legacy coming out of COVID might be one of the worst in the country too, right? So I think that there was just a lot of dread. And then they have this youthful figure who is running, I think he ran a very, very good campaign. He's communicating in different ways. He's saying what he means. He's talking plainly. I think that probably just worked for a lot of people. And they're like, you know what, I'm willing to take a chance on this. Maybe, he won't be so terrible when he gets in there and realizes, the realities of governing versus campaigning, because we just cannot have this guy again.
What do you take from this, though? I mean, you guys still run candidates, still very much involved in the day-to-day retail politics and whatnot. What do you take away from this, man? I know you said you're clearly you think that this is kind of an anomaly. You guys are both saying like the Cuomo factor is a big deal.
Yeah.
But there's got to be some lessons to learn.
There's a ton of lessons, and I think they're positive ones. Regardless of where you fall on the spectrum as Democrats, I think that across the board, especially in swing states, which is imperative for the midterms, again, coming back to that idea of economic populist messaging, right? Not going out there and being Bernie Sanders, with a bunch of top 1% jargon that can alienate people, but talking about making sure that American families and American workers can put food on the table, and speaking to the pain that a lot of young Americans are feeling where they don't feel like they have access to the traditional capitalist system, right? I think there's lessons to be learned, and you can extrapolate that as a candidate at any level without having to be a Democratic Socialist or paint yourself in that guy's image.
And do you think those messages actually really do alienate a lot of folks, or do you think like if you went out there and made that strong case, you could get more people on board? I mean, because remember back in 2016, Bernie Sanders had zero support when he started his campaign. He went out, he launched his damn campaign. He went out on the lawn of the Senate, about 5-6 reporters out there. And what he had to say was a very progressive Democratic Socialist message, and it caught fire with certain elements of your party.
Because it was simple. I mean, think about the things that Trump says that get the best reactions, right? It's the jobs are coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Don't leave. The jobs are coming back. I'm going to freeze your rent. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
no tax on tips.
Right. These small little things that to me, like populism, right, is all about just like throwing out the thing that's going to stick. And it's usually short. It's usually very descriptive, and it's very powerful. Mm-hmm. What are people struggling with? Rent. What are people struggling with in rural Ohio? Jobs. They're never coming back. Oh, don't leave. Do not leave. Your jobs are coming back. Like, right. So to me, so much of Bernie's success in 16, AOC's, right? They're distilling things really well, right? Politics is the art of reduction. Like, it's a very reductive exercise. We're taking these very, esoteric statements about, jobs and crap and whatever, and distilling it down into sound bites. I mean, what in a 30-second TV ad, it's like 76
Well,
words,
I mean,
right?
Donald Trump was the master at that.
Yeah, so that's my point. Is like these progressive candidates have figured out what they're doing better than a lot of other Democrats. What Donald Trump does better than anyone right now is connect people very quickly with these very short phrases that just get at the heart of whatever the hell is going on in that person's life and creates an emotional connection, right? Whether or not they are real, actionable, just pie in the sky. Carrier is not building an AC unit in rural Ohio ever again. It will never be economically viable. It will be a $20,000 AC unit. Never going to happen. Did that stop Trump? Mondami's probably never going to institute a rent freeze or rent control. And it would be disastrous. It would make housing that much more expensive. But it sounds great.
And he's not talking down to people either. You know what I mean? Like, he's not like
point.
just jamming, educational talking points into people's minds. He's taking their reality and reflecting it
Which
back
is a
to
problem
them.
for you Democrats.
It is, but I think that's the thing that you take away from it, regardless, again, of where you're at in the party or where you're running. I think that's the lesson is you need to reflect back a feeling and emotion to someone you're trying to persuade.
And
That's
think
the difference.
about, too, he did all this. Every public appearance I ever saw him, he was wearing a suit. Same thing with Donald Trump. Remember way back in 2022 how they tried to dress down Mitt Romney?
Yeah.
And he looked so incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right? Everything he does. And Martha McSally looked so uncomfortable. Like, you can feel it.
People want authenticity.
And you can feel it when that candidate, it just looks like, why are you here? right? So that guy's walking around New York City wearing a suit and still connecting with people on the street and churning out fantastic content and building and building and building and building upon that. Next thing you know, I love looking at that one chart from Predict It, the betting markets, where it's like just all of a sudden he just shoots straight up and Cuomo goes straight down and they converge, right? Like it was just relentless. But the guy was so comfortable, was so authentic, and he didn't talk down, and that allowed him to connect with people in a very deep emotional way. And I think it's probably what eventually caught a lot of these, wealthier folks in New York City saying, screw it, let's give him a try.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, because when you start talking about reductive politics, I mean, Donald Trump, again, we said, was the master. He put an entire campaign and fitted on a red baseball hat.
Yeah.
And people would ask last year, if you asked them what the candidates, campaign was all about, they could recite Donald Trump's "Make America Great."
Right. Whereas for us, it's like bring down the oligarchy. It's like, what does that mean?
Or
Build back better.
Yeah, build, like, what was all that? What was Kamala's? What was her? In a phrase that you could fit on a baseball hat. What was her campaign about?
And Trump's colloquial way of communicating, right? I mean, it has made something that would have been laughable a decade ago. So branding and
I think
a big beautiful bill.
Yeah.
That's now that is now a common phrase that we are accepting as a reasonable way to describe a large omnibus bill to fund the government.
Well, and
it's comical, but because Trump has rewired us to think in his vernacular.
And the one thing I would add to you guys, because you both made the point that he doesn't talk down to people. The thing is, he talks to them as well, and talks about about issues that they care about. There is always a little bit of theater involved in politics. Like, this guy's not going to freeze my rent, but he's acknowledging it. He cares and he acknowledges it. And Democrats, and a lot of times they talk about a lot of issues, I think, that don't necessarily affect the average voter's life.
It's too macro, right?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is, you talk about him talking to people. He was on a lot of mediums that Democrats have not traditionally gone to campaign on, which I think is a big part of our analysis from 2024. Is you got to go on more kind of obscure podcasts. You got to go and talk on sports radio. You got to go and find people in different places where they're absorbing information. So I think that's another key piece of information to take away.
I would take it one step further, though. I think, and then in the traditional routes of media, he was just better at it. I mean, everything like Twitter and Instagram. I mean, the content he was churning out, the crossovers, utilizing, relatable endorsers, right? I mean, Andrew Cuomo had Michael Bloomberg and Bill Clinton, and Mondami had Jesus Nice and the Kid Mero, right? Like, who do you think more New Yorkers identify with today?
Well, and one just ran a really old feeling campaign, and this Mondami is running he's that fresh face, that new kind of politic out there. So let's wrap on this. Like, what
campaign?
Yeah, what do Arizona Democrats have to do? To get to keep keep in the game. I mean, Arizona's always been kind of counter-cyclical politically for most of my career, and in a time when Democrats are out in the wilderness and federally, they own some of the top spots here in Arizona, and those spots are going to be up for re-election.
Yeah, but let's start. Like, Andrew Cuomo ran a uniquely terrible race too. He was expecting a coronation. Like, this guy, I mean, mailed it in every sense of the phrase, right? He didn't go to forums. He didn't participate. He had no ground game, no field. I mean, he just took everyone for granted. He assumed that he was going to, with his wealthy donor friends, was going to be able to drop $20, $30 million on New York broadcast and cakewalk in. I don't think Governor Hobbs, Senator Kelly, Senator Gallego, just given the campaigns that they have run, are ever going to be at risk of running a Andrew Cuomo style campaign for re-election. So let's start there. I mean, it was uniquely terrible.
Yeah.
I think we are very lucky that we do have a bunch of candidates who do care what people think and do care about getting out into other parts of the state, not just staying here in Phoenix and understanding what's going on in the lives of rural Arizonans and putting in the work. So I'm not too concerned.
Yeah, and not to clip your wings or anything like that, but I think, again, the question's premise is on the assumption that this was kind of a bellwether for where the party should go nationally. And I still think, to where we started the conversation, it's an outlier incident, comes back to the bad Cuomo campaign. It's in the bluest of blue districts. But again, I do think the key lessons for us to take away, as we do campaigns in Arizona and across the country, is don't talk down to people, right? Talk about things in their lives and reflect it back to them, and lean into the economic, populist, simple messaging, because I think that's more reflective of where people are at. Just
So
given
you're
this
almost
economy.
making the case that it's not an outlier.
Well, I think that,
you know what I mean? Because like that's what he did, and he was doing that to his electorate.
yeah, again, I think it comes
And
back
Democrats-
to Joe's point. You can't ignore the positive elements of it from just, good campaigning, right? But I don't think it means that now suddenly every moderate, pragmatic, pro-business Democrat is suddenly screwed, and they're going to have to yield to someone who's coming at this from a Democratic Socialist perspective in a primary, right? I think there's messaging lessons to gain, but I don't think the party itself is reoriented in some
What
new
if
way.
his opponent was the second coming of Mike Bloomberg? He could still run a fantastic race. He probably would have and would have overperformed, but he wouldn't be winning.
Yep.
Right. That to me is the lesson: is that his success is also a function of how bad his opponent was. There's also a phenomenon we are not unacquainted with here in Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, but
Thank you, Carrie Lake.
no, I'm not talking about what happened with Stanton and her again. I'm over that this week. I think that's a good place to start to stop this conversation. I want to thank you guys for stopping by here and talking a little bit about that. I know the New York City mayor's race may not feel like a whole lot, but like it is one of the most high-profile races. I think a lot of people know who the mayor of New York is.
Yeah.
Outside, like, you get to president, vice president, and I think more people would identify who the New York mayor is than than almost any other politician in the
No,
country.
it's exciting to watch, but Arizona's going to be more exciting next year, so that's what people should tune in for.
Yeah.
My hope, though, is to your point. I mean, the mayor of New York is usually identified as a standard bearer for the Democratic Party, so I do hope that Mr. Mondami understands that and doesn't overindulge and then stain us all with his mess in the process. So
If he wins.
Which he will.
All right. We will wrap it up there. Gentlemen, have a great weekend.
Thanks, you
Dennis.
too.
Welcome back to Politics Unplugged, the back half of the show. As always, I'm joined by Colin Stanton. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm hanging in there. I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, another long week, dude. Another long week. It's Friday. It's a good day. It's a good day. We tape on Fridays. It looks like when we come back like a week from now, government will still be up and running.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like state avoided a government shutdown. They're moving through their budget proposals and all that fun stuff. So the legislature did its job at the last minute.
Yeah. We won't have to talk about will they get a budget or not.
No, and it's funny. It was like I'm always tempted to criticize and judge, and I have to remind myself that I am a journalist.
Yeah.
And I don't get shit done unless there's a deadline.
There's that. Yes. Yeah. No. I think the managing editor could probably attest to your issues there. So
It's like journalists don't get anything done unless there's a deadline involved.
no. So it looks like they got it done. Yippee.
Yay, and we can move on. Let's talk a little bit. Let's follow up a little bit on the conversation with just had with Joe and Matt on this. You have a little bit of a different take on this, or a very different take on this, which I tend to kind of agree with. I think results from the primary election in Democratic primary election in New York, I think is a big wake up call or a message to Democrats across the country.
Yeah. I think once Mamdani got his message out there, in about 2 weeks, he went from down 24 points to winning soundly. I mean, it wasn't even that close.
Yeah.
And Cuomo was a dirtbag, and Cuomo ran a bad campaign.
But you don't get an army of thousands of volunteers the size of which he had unless you've got a message that's really resonating with people.
Yeah. And I mean, you can write that off at your peril and say, well, it's populist message. Of course they do. Well, yeah, because when you say people should be able to afford groceries, and I'm going to take steps to make sure you can afford groceries, and people believe you're actually going to take steps to afford groceries, that's much, much better than the usual Democratic messaging.
Well, and like the housing stuff, it's like, rent freeze, these kinds of things wouldn't work in Arizona.
No.
But also like this milk milquetoast stuff from Democrats here when you start talking about housing, not going to work much either. You're talking about like, a couple of years ago, the governor was touting how she put money in the housing trust fund and all this other stuff. And it's like, you got to explain what a trust fund is. And it doesn't really help the average person, in the middle class or lower middle class. And here's Mamdani is like speaking directly to people, which I think is the big message from here, is that, Democrats, again, stop talking down to people, because Democrats can tend to be a bunch of elitists looking down their noses at some folks. But you got to meet them where they're at. I mean, there's some real issues out there with housing and other things like that he was addressing in New York. And I think Democrats would do well by learning some of those lessons.
Yeah. I mean, if you ask a Democrat in Arizona, particularly a young Democrat, what the top issues are, and I'm guessing housing prices will be number one on that list. And, Mamdani is going out there talking about rent freezes and rent control, and maybe that'll work and maybe it won't, but it's something. Mm-hmm. And the Democrats in Arizona are offering what, casitas? I mean, we're not stupid. We know that's not going to do a goddamn thing for anyone.
Oh, yeah. The casita bill. Good God.
Yes. And, I mean, if you are a young Democrat trying to pay the rent, hoping someday maybe you can buy a house, what are you getting from the state party right now? Yeah. What are you getting from Democrats in general? Because the casita ain't it.
Yeah.
And if you have someone at least saying, hey, look, my first priority is to get your damn rent down. It's too high. Mm-hmm. We need to fix that. I don't know if the answer is rent control. Maybe there's a different answer out there. But at least I, as a voter, I would look at that and believe this is a guy who's committed to find something to work.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that at all from the mainstream Democratic messaging.
Because the one thing in politics that's universally true, we've seen a lot of changes in politics, particularly on the technology side. The one thing that's always been true about politics is it's how they make you feel. Even years later, like you and I were, of the age, like, we our parents, they remember Reagan fondly, probably.
Yeah.
They don't remember specifically what he did.
No.
They remember how he made them feel. Yeah. And that's what great politicians can do. Yeah. And what Mamdani is doing is he's making them feel heard. Voters are, because there is nothing more, appealing in life and better feeling in life when you feel that somebody gets you.
Yeah.
That validation out there. Like, man, I'm not crazy. Okay. You get me. And I think, you saw that with Trump, a lot of folks on that side of the aisle, were like, yeah, he gets us. This, my job left. He's going to make it better. Now, whether he gets it done or not, he's not going to bring those jobs back. He's not going to make Mexico pay for the wall. But those were issues. He was talking directly to people, and they felt like he got them.
Yeah.
And I'm not debating the merits of those issues, but I'm just saying from a pure raw political point of view.
Yes. And one thing that's bothered me for a while now is as Democrats struggle with how do you effectively counter Trump, where does the party go from here? The answer always seems to be moving to the right. Mm-hmm. Like, can we pick off some of those MAGA guys if we say, okay, we hate those people too, or we give in a little bit here and move to the right, to the right, to the right, and
you co-sponsor a Lake and Riley Act.
Yes,
and,
yes. Rubin gets in, and immediately he's moving to the right. Kirsten Sinema gets in, and everything that she ever ran on, she craps on from the Senate, and it doesn't work. What you do is you alienate everyone on the left who voted for you. And it's like, why did I vote for you? Why did I care about this? You're just doing what everyone on the right's doing. And I mean, like, you look at the success Bernie Sanders had when he ran and the way his message connected. And I think Bernie Sanders is a clown. I think Bernie Sanders is an absolute empty suit with a good message. But that really resonated with people.
Well, like I said, it was in the podcast. There's a reason he went from announcing his campaign on the lawn of the U.S. Senate to a handful of reporters to what we saw, to what we've seen since then.
Yeah, And the problem with Bernie's not his message. The problem with Bernie is he's a decent messenger with no track record of accomplishing anything.
Sure.
He's not, there's no substance there. You get someone with substance who's not 80 years old with that message, and you've got something. I mean, if AOC runs in the next election, the Democratic establishment is going to be shocked at how well she does.
Well, and I think that too is a message we saw from New York. Is just a lot of the rank and file Democrat Party is just like, we're over the establishment.
Yes,
because he had all, because Cuomo had the endorsements from the Bill Clintons and the Chuck Schumers, and all of that, and they're like pound sand, man.
Yes,
we're moving on, and the establishment better look at this.
Yes, they keep clinging to the Chuck Schumers of the party, and that's going to kill them. You can't do that. People don't want that. The Democrats don't want that. They want to get younger. They want to get more progressive. And the more you try to cling to let's see where Trump wants to go with this, and not defend anything. It doesn't work.
It's like if you keep this up, it's like, the Democrat establishment will just the only people they'll be able to hang out with is the never Trump Republicans.
Yes.
Because like your party's left, the Republicans left the never Trumpers.
Yeah.
Right. And then, that's where Democrats are moving now at that party, I feel. And I feel like this election is a glimpse into that, is a real thing.
Yeah.
And we're getting more data about what happened in that election. And then I believe on July 1st, they have the ranked choice voting system out there. We'll get more official results of what happened there. And then then they'll move on to a general election. And I think Mondani probably ends up winning as the next mayor of New York City.
I think he mops the floor with the opposition on that one.
Yeah. I mean, Eric Adams has got all sorts of fucking baggage.
I mean, Eric Adams is a Democrat who's now trying to kiss up to the Republicans.
He got pardoned by Trump. So
yeah. And then the Republican is like, is it really Curtis Sliwa? That's the best they could do?
It's New York.
The Guardian Angels, dude?
It's New York, man.
I was reading up on this, and I saw Curtis Sliwa, and I'm like, that can't be right.
Yeah, I think, the Adams stuff has got some problems, and is Cuomo going to run as an independent? I think, the message is that, New York is over the Cuomos.
Yeah.
Yeah. Their father, Mario, was a beloved figure in New York, but I think they're just over it.
Yeah. Yes, they're over the Cuomos.
Over the establishment.
But I think if you write this election off to everyone's over the Cuomos, you're missing the big story here.
I think you're right with that. I think that's a convenient story to tell yourself.
Yes. They're over the Cuomos, but Cuomo was beating the hell out of the competition in the polls just a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as Mamdani got his message out and people started going, wow, who is this guy? He's actually within 24 points. And people heard from him. Suddenly he's winning by like 13.
Yeah. Campaigns still freaking matter, man.
Yes.
And candidates matter.
And give the people someone they believe in and who is actually talking about issues that are important to them. No. And you can succeed. And I think the Democrats have failed pretty badly in that regard.
And particularly like the housing stuff here. I mean,
yes.
I'd almost forgotten about the casita bill. Why did I almost forget about that? Because it doesn't do anything.
Yes. That's our answer to housing is, well, let people build a little house in their backyard.
And who can build a little house in the backyard? People could fucking afford it.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, that's the best we could do for housing is build if everything goes perfectly and the best projections, a few hundred little huts and back houses or, in backyards.
Yeah. And if you're lucky, maybe you too will be able to rent a little hut in someone's backyard.
Yeah. Like they're not just Airbnbs.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But the Housing Trust Fund, dude.
Yeah, overall, I think overlook these results at your peril. I think people are going to look back someday and look at this race as a as a major. I hope people look back and see this as a major turning point, because if we don't, the Democratic Party is just spiraling.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
Chuck Schumer's the future. Maybe Nancy Pelosi can run the next election.
You know, to Pelosi's credit, man. I mean, she's kept a pretty low profile, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, she left the speakership, and she's just,
Yes.
you know, and there was, you know, whether there was a near tragedy that may have played a part in it.
Yes.
But she is largely just been very quiet.
And to be clear, I'm not anti Pelosi, but it's 2025 and stop following 80-year-olds for the party.
Stop throwing boomers at voters.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
You know, we're Gen X. We've never got a president yet.
No.
We might get skipped over.
We're going to get completely skipped over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's another
Whatever.
podcast.
That's fine.
Let's have a podcast on that next.
Yeah. Yeah. Gen X, we're used to being ignored. That's fine.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah.
We ignored as parents, but that's all. Our parents ignored us as children. You know. So whatever.
Yeah.
Let's move on and talk about one of our favorite topics. The Suns. There was a draft.
There's a draft and a trade since we last did this.
Yeah.
And for the record, I believe on the last podcast, I said I thought Durant was going to Houston, and then the day the podcast actually dropped, he was traded to Houston. So at least I got that right.
Well, you look good. Unlike our some of our previous political predictions.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, if anybody's keeping track, please don't.
Yeah.
But we're also the first to admit that. Yeah. But getting some pretty positive reviews about what the Suns have been doing, unless you're Stephen A. Smith, which we don't really care about his opinion.
No, I don't care about Stephen A. Smith's opinion on anything. I think the trade was a little disappointing, but it was what was out there.
Yeah.
You didn't get much for Kevin Durant. He's going to be 37 when the season starts. He only has 1 year.
You made a really good point when we were talking. Like, there wasn't much they could do because they're in basically financial NBA jail.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as they're over the second apron, they're still over the second apron. There's very, very, very little they can do. Huh.
Like for example, like even if they could have gotten more out of the trade, which everybody's screaming about, could they have afforded that?
No, and they as soon as you start adding other players in, the salaries don't match, and you can't do it
because they're over the second apron.
Because and in general there are restrictions on that. But yes, if they were below the cap, you could talk about someone like Reed Shepherd. People were saying, why isn't Reed Shepherd in there? Part of it is the Rockets were dealing from strength, and they didn't want to put Reed Shepherd in there. But the other thing is, Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks' contracts roughly add up to Kevin Durant's contract, so that you could make that trade, and you couldn't throw anyone else in because it wouldn't be close enough. And the Suns are restricted to the point
That's fascinating.
Where you have to do it.
It seems like a number one priority then should be getting out from under that apron.
It absolutely has to be. I will assume they will do that at some point. If they don't, it's a colossal failure. They're hitting the point where their draft picks will start automatically going to the bottom of the round. Mm-hmm. Not that they have any anymore. Mm. But, if you're enough of a repeater under the second apron, if you have the second pick in the draft, it becomes the 30th pick in the draft. And there are any number of other restrictions that make it just so hard to make any kind of deal. So they need to duck under that. For example, the Boston Celtics. There were three teams over the second apron this year. The Suns, who had the highest payroll in the league, the Celtics, and the Timberwolves. The Celtics just had Jason Tatum get hurt and will miss most of, if not all, of next season. And as a result, they're dumping salary like crazy, unloaded Drew Holiday, unloaded Kristaps Porzingis, and that's to get under the second apron because they're not winning anything without Tatum, so they're going to get the hell out from under the second apron no matter what.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Suns didn't even make the play-in, and they're still over the second apron. It's time to start throwing stuff overboard. And in that regard, that's one reason why they made a draft day trade where they picked up Mark Williams, a center from Charlotte. Most people have been semi-positive about it. They did it as they drafted another center. They still have a couple centers on the roster.
You got 14 feet of center.
Yes, and they just added another salary and another center. they've got a lot of work to do. I assume they're going to start really, really making deals and getting the salary down and moving players out because the roster they have right now makes no sense whatsoever. So I will withhold some judgment until we see what this might look like. They just traded for Dylan Brooks. It would not surprise me at all if they traded him away. I'd like to see them keep him. I don't know if they will. They traded for Jalen Green. They say they're going to keep him. I'm guessing they probably will because I don't think there's a trade market for him.
No. I think there's a trade market for Brooks. He's
Yes.
a 3-and-D guy.
3-and-D guy. The thing I love about him is he's a pain in the ass. He's an agitator. And the thing that got me watching the Suns last year was too often they didn't look like they cared at all.
Mm-hmm.
And Dylan Brooks cares intensely about everything.
Didn't you feel like you were watching a team last 2 years, really? They were just miserable,
Yeah.
just enduring that they had.
Yeah.
It just
And part of that is Kevin Durant, and I love Kevin Durant. I don't particularly mean this as a criticism, but he has this sort of aloof, I'm out here hooping, having a good time quality, and he's not an intense competitor, at least from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
He seems like a laid-back guy who just loves to go out and ball, and he does it incredibly well. He's been their best player for the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard some people griping about Durant, how they think it's addition through subtraction, and it's not. He was their best player last couple of years, and it was not close.
Mm-hmm.
But he also has this sort of laid-back approach and persona that I think the rest of the team sort of absorbed. And it can be a tough watch because they'll be behind in a close game and playing like they don't give a shit and throwing the ball into the stands and just looking miserable. And that ain't Dylan Brooks. Dylan Brooks is nuts.
Now, yeah, that was the thing. It was like watching the team. It was just they looked kind of miserable.
Yeah.
And there was a sloppiness to everything. It was just so frustrating.
Yeah.
But yeah, they picked up a pretty good center from Duke.
Guy from Duke, Maliuch.
Yeah, and
Malawach.
And then
I'm going to struggle with that one.
I know. Well, it's been a day for that.
Malawach.
It's been a day for that with some tongue twisters today. But they made a couple of good picks in the second round. I mean, second rounders are like they don't often hit, but
you're taking a flyer no matter what you
Yeah.
do. They don't often hit. But the Rasheer Fleming,
yeah.
Everyone seemed to be surprised he dropped to the second round. I saw speculation early yesterday that someone's going to be, watch and see who moves up to get this guy because he shouldn't be in the second round. He's really talented. And it was the Suns. So give them credit. The Suns had a bunch of second-round picks, and they consolidated and traded around to move up to get better picks, which I thought was a very good move. He comes highly touted. I'm not going to pretend I'm a college basketball expert, but all the people whose views I respect seemed really happy with that pick. And then the Kobe Brea, who they got 10 picks later,
Yeah. I hear he's really good shooter. So.
apparently the best three-point shooter in college. Other parts of the game are suspect, but okay, I'll take the guy who was the best three-point shooter in college. If his defense can get better, other things can get better, that would be great. If we have someone who can shoot from outside, that's a bonus.
All right, man. Well, that's good, man. It's something to look forward to. NBA season's over, and we're inching closer and closer to the NFL, which makes me happy.
Yeah.
As as my Diamondbacks keep handing out Tommy John surgeries to their pitchers.
Yeah.
It's been a disappointing year for Arizona sports.
Yeah. Hey, my Angels are up to 500.
Congratulations.
Thank
you.
It
Isn't that
doesn't happen
special?
very often,
Isn't that
man.
special?
This late in the year, it's almost July, and they're at 500.
There's no way Mike Trout wants to play baseball in October, though.
They should hang a banner, like 500 in late June. Which, to be fair, I mean the Diamondbacks are a little better than that, but their records are not wildly different.
Oh well, look at their IR right now. They're the
I know.
damn MASH unit.
Yes.
Corbin
Burnson there now.
Yeah, he's gone. He's gone for another year and a half, 2 years with this.
Corbin Burnson. Jesus, did I just say Corbin Burnson?
The actor
From L.A. Law.
Wow.
My God.
Wow.
How about Corbin Carroll?
Corbin Carroll. He's on the IR. Corbin Burns from L.A. Law.
Corbin Burnson from L.A. Law.
He's like 80 now. Like that's.
And if
I
you
think
asked me who that blonde actor was from L.A. Law, it would have taken me forever to come up with Corbin Burnson.
the brain is weird, man.
It really is. It's been a tough week.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Why don't we wrap up there, man? It's been a long week, and
seems wise.
nice. Nice. Thanks for taking me back to L.A. Law.
Yeah, you bet. See you next week.
See y'all.
Thanks for listening. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, the Google Store, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. See you next time.